Celebrity offspring of the legendary Sonny and Cher, Chastity Bono. Generation of Americans grew up watching her on her parents' television show. She is now in the process of switching genders. Chastity is going to become a man.
Cher conquered music, movies, and pop culture. But the most dramatic story of her life happened off stage. In 2025, her only child stands as one of Hollywood's most misunderstood figures, shaped by fame, conflict, and constant public scrutiny. Behind the headlines lies a deeply personal journey rarely told in full. So who is Cher's only child today? And what truths have been hidden behind the spotlight all these years? Chaz Bono is the only child Cher had with her first husband, Sonny Bono, and his life story stands as one of the most candid, complex, and culturally influential narratives in modern celebrity history. Born on March 4, 1969 in Los Angeles, California, Chaz entered the world at the height of Sonny and Cher's fame, when the duo had already become a defining presence in American pop culture. From the beginning, his life unfolded under extraordinary circumstances, one where family life, entertainment, and public attention were inseparable. As a toddler, Chaz appeared regularly on the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour, becoming a familiar face to millions of television viewers. While many children grow up with home videos, Chaz's early memories were preserved on national television. This constant visibility shaped his childhood in unique ways, blending affection and opportunity with pressure and exposure. He grew up surrounded by performers, cameras, rehearsals, and applause, learning early how fame could both elevate and complicate everyday life. However, behind the scenes, Chaz's family life was far from simple. Sonny and Cher divorced in 1975, when Chaz was just 6 years old. The separation, and the very public custody battle that followed, marked a turning point in his childhood. Raised primarily by Cher, Chaz navigated the emotional weight of divided parents while remaining a public figure himself. The media attention surrounding the divorce intensified his awareness that his family life was never entirely private, a reality that would follow him into adulthood. During his teenage years, Chaz struggled with identity, self-esteem, and the pressures of living up to two legendary parents. Though musically inclined, he initially resisted following directly in their footsteps. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Chaz explored music on his own terms, forming a band called Ceremony, which released an album in 1995. The project allowed him to express himself creatively without leaning too heavily on the Bono name, though commercial success remained modest. For much of his early and adult life, Chaz was known publicly as Chastity Son Bono, a name and identity that had followed him since birth under the intense gaze of celebrity culture. Yet beneath the familiarity of that public image, Chaz spent years grappling privately with feelings of discomfort, confusion, and disconnection from his assigned gender. These internal struggles were not sudden or impulsive. They were the result of long-term introspection, emotional conflict, and a growing need to live authentically, beyond expectations shaped by fame, family legacy, and societal norms. In 2009, Chaz made the life-altering decision to transition from female to male, a choice that marked one of the most visible transgender journeys in American popular culture at the time. When he announced his transition publicly, the moment resonated far beyond his personal life. At a time when transgender representation was limited and often misunderstood, Chaz's openness challenged widespread assumptions and brought a deeply human face to an issue many Americans had never encountered firsthand. As part of this transition, he legally changed his name to Chaz Salvatore Bono, a deeply symbolic act that honored his late father, Sonny Bono, while also affirming his own identity. The choice reflected both continuity and transformation, acknowledging his family roots while reclaiming ownership of his future. It was not an erasure of the past, but rather an integration of it into a more truthful self. The process was not without hardship. Chaz faced intense public scrutiny, invasive media attention, and polarized reactions from the public. Support poured in from the LGBTQ+ community and allies, while criticism and misunderstanding followed just as loudly. For Chaz, the challenge was not only navigating the physical and emotional realities of transition, but also doing so under a microscope that magnified every step. Despite this, he consistently emphasized that his decision was not about attention or rebellion. It was about survival, mental health, and the basic human need to live honestly. One of the most powerful elements of Chaz's journey was its impact on his relationship with his mother, Cher. Initially, she struggled deeply with the transition, later admitting that she mourned the loss of the daughter she believed she had. Their relationship entered a painful but necessary period of adjustment, marked by difficult conversations, emotional distance, and eventual understanding. Over time, Cher's love for her child outweighed her fear and confusion, and she emerged as a vocal supporter of Chaz, an evolution that mirrored the journey many families experienced alongside him. This transformative chapter of Chaz's life was documented in the 2011 film Becoming Chaz, an intimate and unflinching portrayal of his transition. Rather than focusing on controversy, the documentary highlighted vulnerability, family bonds, medical realities, and emotional resilience. Viewers were offered a rare window into the everyday realities of a transgender individual, not as a headline, but as a human being navigating change with honesty and courage. Becoming Chaz received widespread critical acclaim and won the GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding Documentary, praised for its respectful storytelling and educational value. The film played a crucial role in shifting public perception, helping audiences understand that gender identity is not a trend or a performance, but a deeply rooted aspect of self. For many transgender viewers, Chaz's story became a source of validation. For others, it served as a first introduction to transgender experiences grounded in empathy rather than stereotype. Following the documentary, Chaz emerged as a leading voice for transgender visibility and LGBTQ+ advocacy. He used his platform to speak openly about mental health, self-acceptance, and the importance of family support. His presence in interviews, public events, and later television appearances helped normalize transgender lives in mainstream spaces that had long excluded them. Chaz Bono's transition was never framed by him as an endpoint, but as the beginning of a more truthful life. While his journey unfolded publicly, its core message remained deeply personal. Authenticity is not about comfort or approval. It is about alignment between who you are and how you live. In embracing that truth, Chaz did more than redefine his own identity. He helped reshape the national conversation around gender, courage, and what it truly means to be oneself. Chaz Bono's relationship with his mother, Cher, underwent one of its most profound evolutions during and after his transition, becoming a deeply human story of love, grief, growth, and reconciliation. While Cher has long been celebrated for her boldness, independence, and progressive public persona, she has been equally candid about how emotionally challenging it was to adjust to her child's transformation. Her struggle was never rooted in rejection or intolerance, but in the raw parental experience of change, one that required her to confront feelings she had not anticipated. Cher has openly described the early stages of Chaz's transition as difficult, explaining that it felt like losing one child to get a new one. This phrase, repeated in interviews over the years, captured a reality many parents quietly experience but rarely articulate. For Cher, the child she had raised, named, and imagined through decades of memories seemed to be slipping away, even as she knew intellectually that Chaz was still the same person she loved. The emotional conflict lay in reconciling memory with reality, past identity with present truth. During this period, the bond between mother and child was strained. Cher admitted that she needed time and space to process her emotions privately, something she felt was denied to her because of her fame. Unlike most parents, her journey of adjustment unfolded under public scrutiny, with media outlets framing her reactions as political statements rather than personal ones. This added pressure intensified the challenge, forcing her to navigate grief, learning, and acceptance in front of a global audience. Despite the difficulty, Cher never stopped emphasizing that her love for her child was unwavering. She made a deliberate effort to educate herself, to listen rather than resist, and to understand the lived reality of transgender people, beginning with her own son. Over time, confusion gave way to compassion, and fear was replaced by a growing sense of pride. Cher has since acknowledged that much of her initial pain came from confronting her own expectations, not from anything Chaz had done wrong. Chaz, for his part, has spoken with empathy about his mother's journey. In interviews, he has consistently stressed that transition affects families as well as individuals, and that parents are often forced to unlearn deeply ingrained ideas about gender, identity, and parenthood. Rather than framing Cher's initial struggle as rejection, Chaz described it as part of a process, one that required patience, communication, and mutual vulnerability. As their relationship evolved, so did Cher's public stance. She began using Chaz's masculine pronouns, corrected herself when necessary, and spoke openly about her pride in the man her son had become. Her support became visible not only in private moments, but also in public statements, interviews, and advocacy for LGBTQ+ acceptance. What once felt like loss gradually transformed into understanding, and eventually into a deeper, more honest connection between them. The shift in their relationship also changed how Cher spoke about motherhood itself. She acknowledged that loving a child sometimes means letting go of preconceived narratives and embracing change without fully understanding it at first. Her honesty resonated with many parents navigating similar paths, offering reassurance that acceptance does not always arrive instantly, but it can arrive sincerely. Beyond the intensely personal chapters of his life, Chaz Bono has built a career defined by intention, creativity, and advocacy, steadily forging an identity that exists independently of his famous parents. While many celebrity children struggle to escape inherited fame, Chaz made a conscious effort early on to understand who he was outside of the Bono legacy. This desire for self-definition led him to pursue formal artistic training and to approach his career with seriousness rather than entitlement. As a teenager, Chaz attended the prestigious LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts in New York City, an institution known for nurturing raw talent and creative discipline. Removed from Hollywood and the immediate influence of his mother's celebrity, Chaz found space to explore performance, storytelling, and self-expression on his own terms. The experience proved formative, allowing him to develop confidence as an artist rather than simply a famous surname. At LaGuardia, he was evaluated for his work ethic and ability, not his lineage, which helped solidify his commitment to the craft. After returning to Los Angeles, Chaz pursued acting in a way that mirrored his broader life philosophy, quietly, persistently, and without shortcuts. He took on a range of roles in independent films and television, gravitating toward projects that explored human complexity rather than mainstream spectacle. His appearances on shows such as American Horror Story introduced him to new audiences and demonstrated his willingness to engage with challenging material, particularly narratives that examine identity, trauma, and transformation. Chaz's work in the horror genre became especially notable, culminating in his role as both actor and executive producer on the independent horror film Little Bites, 2024. The project reflected his growing influence behind the camera, signaling a shift from performer to creative collaborator and decision-maker. By stepping into a production role, Chaz asserted greater control over storytelling, choosing projects that align with his values and artistic vision rather than commercial expectation. His involvement in Little Bites underscored his commitment to genre storytelling as a vehicle for deeper psychological themes. Parallel to his acting career, Chaz emerged as a powerful voice in literature. As an author, he has written multiple memoirs that chart his evolution from a child of television fame to a public figure navigating sexuality, identity, and gender. His books, including Family Outing, which focused on coming out as gay, and Transition, the story of how I became a man, which chronicled his gender transition, are marked by honesty, vulnerability, and clarity. Rather than presenting himself as an authority, Chaz wrote as a fellow traveler, offering reassurance to readers who felt unseen or misunderstood. These memoirs became important resources within the LGBTQ+ community, especially for those wrestling with identity later in life or within unsupportive environments. Chaz's writing emphasized patience, self-compassion, and the reality that personal truth often unfolds over time. His willingness to document confusion as openly as certainty resonated deeply, making his books not only personal narratives, but also tools for education and empathy. Chaz's activism grew naturally from his visibility and lived experience. He became a sought-after speaker and advocate, addressing topics such as transgender healthcare, mental health, and family acceptance. Rather than positioning himself as a symbol, he consistently emphasized that no single story represents all transgender experiences. His goal, he has said, is not to speak for everyone, but to help create space where others feel safe speaking for themselves. What distinguishes Chaz Bono's career is its cohesion. His acting, writing, and activism are interconnected expressions of the same principle: authenticity. Whether performing on screen, producing a film, or sharing his story in print, he approaches his work with an emphasis on honesty and purpose. In doing so, Chaz has transformed visibility into impact, proving that a meaningful career is not built on fame alone, but on integrity, persistence, and the courage to live openly. Activism has never been a side chapter in Chaz Bono's life. It is a central, defining thread that runs alongside his personal growth and creative career. Long before transgender issues entered mainstream public discourse, Chaz was already working behind the scenes to challenge stereotypes, expand representation, and push for dignity and equality for LGBTQ+ people. His advocacy was not born from trend or visibility, but from lived experience and a deep awareness of how silence and misrepresentation can harm entire communities. In the 1990s, at a time when LGBTQ+ voices were still largely marginalized in American media, Chaz took on a significant public role as a spokesperson for the human rights campaign HRC. This work placed him at the forefront of national efforts to promote civil rights, legal protections, and social acceptance for gay and lesbian individuals. Coming out publicly during this era required courage. Backlash was common, and support systems were limited. Chaz's willingness to speak openly helped normalize conversations that many people were still afraid to have, especially within families and workplaces. Around the same period, Chaz also served as entertainment media director for GLOAD, Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, a role that allowed him to directly influence how LGBTQ+ people were portrayed in film, television, and news coverage. At a time when queer characters were often reduced to caricatures or used as punchlines, Chaz worked to hold media outlets accountable for harmful depictions. His efforts focused on encouraging fair, accurate, and humanized storytelling, recognizing that representation shapes public perception, policy attitudes, and self-worth for LGBTQ+ youth watching from home. What made Chaz's advocacy particularly impactful was his understanding of media from the inside. Having grown up on television himself, he knew how narratives were constructed and how quickly misinformation could spread. Rather than attacking the industry, he engaged it, educating writers, producers, and journalists on the consequences of language and framing. This strategic approach helped foster gradual but meaningful change, contributing to a cultural shift that would take decades to fully unfold. As transgender visibility slowly increased in the 2000s, Chaz's activism took on even greater significance. After his own transition, he became one of the most recognizable transgender advocates in the United States, not by positioning himself as a spokesperson for all, but by sharing his personal truth with clarity and humility. He emphasized that transgender people are not a monolith, and that understanding begins with listening, not labeling. Chaz used interviews, documentaries, panel discussions, and public appearances to address misconceptions about gender identity, healthcare, and mental health. He spoke candidly about the emotional toll of living inauthentically and the relief that comes with alignment between identity and self-expression. These conversations reached audiences far beyond the LGBTQ+ community, often serving as a first point of contact for people unfamiliar with transgender experiences. Importantly, Chaz framed activism as a long-term commitment rather than a moment of publicity. He consistently highlighted the systemic challenges transgender people face: employment discrimination, healthcare access, legal recognition, and family rejection, while also emphasizing resilience and hope. His advocacy sought balance, acknowledging hardship without reducing transgender lives to struggle alone. By 2025, Chaz Bono's personal life continues to unfold under public attention, reflecting both the progress he has made and the complexities that remain unresolved. Having spent much of his life navigating identity, family, and independence in the spotlight, Chaz now finds himself entering another defining chapter, one shaped not by activism or transition, but by love, commitment, and the quiet assertion of autonomy. What has drawn particular attention, however, is the reported absence of Cher from the guest list. According to sources, this decision stems from lingering family tensions that, while less visible than in the past, have never fully disappeared. The situation underscores a reality often overlooked in public narratives. Personal growth does not automatically resolve every emotional fracture, even when love and respect remain present. For decades, Chaz and Cher's relationship has been framed as a story of reconciliation following struggle, and in many ways, that is true. Cher's public support of Chaz's identity marked a meaningful evolution in their bond. Yet, like many parent-child relationships shaped by fame, history, and deeply emotional transitions, theirs has remained layered and fragile in places. Acceptance does not erase memory, and understanding does not always translate into emotional closeness at every stage of life. Chaz's reported decision to move forward with a wedding that prioritizes his own emotional boundaries reflects a broader pattern in his adulthood. Over the years, he has spoken about the importance of independence, not as rejection, but as self-preservation. Choosing how, where, and with whom he marks major life moments has become part of defining adulthood on his own terms, separate from expectation or legacy. The absence of Cher, while painful to some observers, also highlights the deeply human nature of their relationship. This is not a story of villains or estrangement, but of two people shaped by extraordinary circumstances. A child raised in fame who fought to claim his identity, and a mother whose love was tested by change she never anticipated. Even now, their bond exists somewhere between connection and distance, affection and unresolved emotion. For Chaz, this moment appears less about conflict and more about clarity. Marriage represents a commitment to the future, a future he has worked hard to build with intention, honesty, and self-respect. By keeping the ceremony small and personal, he signals that this milestone belongs first and foremost to him and his partner, not to public narrative or familial symbolism. What do you think about Chaz Bono? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.